Hi, everyone. Welcome to Aurelia's Virtual Book Club. I have Jess Eise here. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, how are you? I'm very happy to be here.
Um, why don't you tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. So my name is Jess Eise, and where to start? I was born in Anchorage, Alaska, and I've lived all over the lower 48, as well as pretty much the world. Just a second, sorry. Sorry, this background noise. And I was, when I graduated from college and got a job in media production that took me from Colombia to where was I? Oman and the Gulf. I was in Egypt, and then I went back to get my degree in journalism at New York University, my master's degree. And then I again started traveling. This time I went to Mauritius and for more media work, and then Guyana, which is where I gained inspiration for my book, Black River Redemption. So I don't know if that was the kind of background you were looking for, but I'm happy to give you any more information. Talking about yourself is such a pain. So
That's why I'm asking the questions.
yeah.
So what was it like traveling around being a media person?
Okay, so one of the things that everybody used to say is, "Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. You get to see so many things." And I'm like, okay, let's talk a minute about luck, right? So you have to sacrifice a lot when you have that kind of lifestyle, right? You don't have you don't have a car, you don't have a house, you're living out of a suitcase, and you experience a lot of loneliness because you're constantly alone, right? You're going to a country where you don't know anybody, you don't know the customs, you don't know the people. So you have to become really, really comfortable with yourself. You're forced to get to know those inner demons. You really have to know who you are to handle that loneliness. And I think that's where a lot of I remember when I was a teenager, I wanted to write so much. I wanted to be a writer, and I read somewhere once that you should gain a little bit of experience and go through some stuff to gain inspiration to writing. Like, you don't need to be a writer genius and as a teenager. You can wait until you're a little bit older and you have experience of things. And I can tell you those experiences, those nights of loneliness, days of confusion, because you experience such extreme range of emotions when you're living abroad in these countries that are so different from your own, fascination, joy, amazement, wonder, shock, awe, and then you experience the whole other extreme of emotions too.
Sounds like it's been really fun.
Yeah.
And it might not have been fun in the moment, but like looking back on it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. One of the best things that I did for myself is I kept journals. Starting at the age of 22, when I went to Egypt, I started journaling. And at the time I thought, oh my gosh, these are such a waste of time. Like, nobody, this isn't going to be interesting and everything. And I'm like, I'm never going to have time to go back and read these journals. And now that things have settled down a little bit, I'm like, those are my most prized possessions, are those journals that I wrote during those times, trying to just capture some of those sensations and experiences and feelings of being in a country where it's not uncommon to see a camel, or being on the island where the dodo bird actually lived, these kinds of experiences.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration specifically for Black River Redemption.
So I went at the beginning of 2014, so about a year and a half ago. I was doing some more freelance media production work, and I flew to Barcelona, which is where our company was headquartered, and we had our annual meeting, and then they assigned us our next locations for where we were going to go. And they told me Guyana. And I'm like, what? is Guyana? Where is Guyana? I looked it up on the map and I see it's next to Venezuela in South America. It's the only English speaking country in South America. And they consider themselves to be, yes, and they consider themselves to be more of the Caribbean than they do to be like Latin American. So we get on the plane and we fly down there, and I land, and I'm all of a sudden like, it's like a different world. I had never been in the Caribbean before, but it was a different world. I've lived and worked in South America, but and never the Caribbean. And from the accents, I mean, it's truly like the stereotypical Caribbean accent to the laid back life. There's pictures of Bob Marley everywhere. It's very calm, like it was so peaceful. Like it was just so peaceful and calm and but there's, while it's a very laid back society, there's also a lot of other things, going on there. There's a lot of there's a lot of social issues and political issues. And as I was getting there in this country, within the first week we interviewed the president of the country. So within the first week we interviewed the president of Guyana. And from there it was like a series of politicians and business leaders. And so I was gaining this remarkable insight into this country. And I'm like, I want to do something with this knowledge, but I want to do it with fiction, and I want to tell a story. And that was what launched this. And there's a couple, there's a lot of details in this book that are actually true. Like the Pegasus, the hotel actually is the Pegasus where I stayed when I was down there. Where one of the protagonists, where she stays when she first arrived, and the characters, a lot of the characters, the sales people I write about in this book, based on based on actual people who were down there, the special forces that were down there, they were down there. All these characters are very real, based on very real people there.
So how has your writing process changed? I know this is the second book that you've written and you're continuing to write more. So how has your process shifted from the first one to the second one and to the work you're doing now?
Sure. Well, there's definitely been a big change, right? So for me, it's been confidence building and writing with a crisper, stronger storytelling tone, like writing with more purpose. But I think a lot of that is confidence, right? Because, when you write your first book, you have all this pressure. You think your first book has to be amazing. You think it has to be great. You're afraid of criticism. You put so much work into it, and what if it's bad? And writing is it's a journey, it's a journey. And so the first book is sort of this confidence building experience, just to be like, okay, I can do it. And then the second one, I had much more purpose in writing it. And I started to experiment a little bit more with a crisper tone and, a little bit of edgier writing style. And I didn't want it to be quite the stereotypical story where, yes, there's romance in it and, but there's also some tragedy and the ending. Well, you have to. I'm not going to give away the ending. You'll have to read it. But but I wanted to. It was a much cleaner, crisper process, I think, the second time around. And I guess my advice is make sure that. This sounds terribly Hemingway, and I don't mean it to. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But make sure that every word you write should have a purpose, and that's what I think I tried to. Really put into play with Black River Redemption.
So how is it different? How is writing this fictionalized story, how has that been different for you than writing like a journalist type article?
It actually comes so much more naturally to me to write fiction. I was trained as a journalist, and I it was good for me. It was good to become agile in that form of writing. And you know, when I was growing up, I used to write stories when I was 5 or 6. I would take my dad's computer paper. I don't know if you remember the computer paper where you had to like fold the edges and like tear off the little like serrated edges. Yeah, I would take his computer paper and I would write stories, imaginary stories. And and that was what I loved, right? When I was 17, I wrote half of a novel. Okay, that was what I loved, half of a fiction novel. But to me, in my head, there was no future in that, right? There was more I wanted to do. There was other things I wanted to do. There was no future in fiction writing. There was no, how do you make a living on fiction writing? You know, so I followed a lot of different paths. And I suppose coming back to this has actually been comforting because it's a space that I feel very comfortable in, is my imagination. Spend a lot of time in my imagination. So.
Me too.
Yeah.
For me, it's like that one thing that's always there that you never talk about.
Yes.
So like it's not tainted by anyone else's expectations.
Yes. You can be, I really love living in my imagination and storytelling. For me, there's always too many stories, right? The imagination element of it for me is not the challenge. I could tell you 20 stories a day and still be able to come up with more stories. But it's I really, really want to, that's what I tell people. I'm definitely not a genius. Okay. So, but I'm willing to work hard. So, your first book, my first book was okay. Second book was better. My third book will be hopefully better. And then it will be a continuing process. And that's the thing, is I think you have to love the process and the actual writing and that journey. And until you're ready to embrace that process, I think it's very difficult to be serious about writing.
Yeah. So a lot of Black River Redemption is based off of your experiences in Guyana.
Yes.
But it's also a fiction novel. So what was it like sort of discovering the bits and pieces that maybe you didn't know when you sat down?
Okay, so there were some elements of, there were, I don't want to tell you too much about what's true and what isn't, because I could, but I'll just say this one part. I really did know a lot of special forces down there. And no, they did not tell me anything of about what they were doing, right? It was all under wraps. What they told me was, they were doing something for the embassy. Okay, I have my master's in journalism, but it's also a joint master's in international studies. And, I interned in a U.S. embassy before, and I have my BA in political science, and I've taken, I've taken a lot of classes on this, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
But I didn't, but they couldn't tell me, right? They didn't tell me. They were very, they did their job. They were very, they stuck to their story. And so I made conjectures. I know about political science and I know these things, and they also, which is pretty common, is they underestimated my experience and my knowledge. And so I was able to connect dots. And in the book, a lot of what I gave it to one of my friends to read, one of these special forces guy. I'm like, hey, read this book. And he read it and he goes, okay, so who talked to you? And I'm like, nobody talked to me. He's like, yeah, no, somebody talked to you. Who talked to you? I'm like, nobody talked to me. I told. And I was like, although I am very flattered. And I told him, I'm like, I told you when I was down there not to underestimate my knowledge on these issues. And he goes, you're right. I'm sorry. I underestimated you. I'm like, yeah, it works. There's different ways of getting information, and I guess that's one of them. So
yeah. Did any of your characters morph into people you didn't expect them to become?
That's a really good question.
Run away from you?
That's a really good question. Not as much actually, yes, one of them did. Oliver, the British guy. I actually was down there with a guy named Oliver Warwick. Warwick is his middle name, who is British. And his character completely ran away from me because it resembles, I mean, physically it's a little bit like him, but I had wanted to capture some of the essence of Oliver, which he's such a unique guy. And this character went a completely different direction, but it was just, he took on a life of his own. So
Yeah, that happens
yeah,
sometimes. So it's cool that it happens not just when you're making everything up, but also when some of it is inspired by real life too.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it makes you wonder a little bit if any of those like fictionalized memoirs are runaway characters.
Yes. I do love a
Yeah.
good fictionalized memoir, though, I have to say.
Yeah, well, they can be really interesting. I think it's really interesting because it captures the culture of a time period,
Mhm.
even if it's not, factually correct.
It's
So,
it's the culture
yeah,
and the rhythm
yeah.
and I guess, you know, I think what's unique about this book is that if you read this and then you went to Guyana, you'd actually be able to be like, whoa, I see this and that and that. Like
Mhm.
you could, it's very accurate, right? It's extremely
Mhm.
accurate. Thing is, not that many people are going to go to Guyana. So, and
Have
one of the,
you have you thought of as like a special like bonus thing of making a collection of photos to go with the story from when you were there?
I thought about it, and it's interesting you mentioned that because the cover photo, I actually
Mhm.
took this picture myself from an airplane. I don't know if you see
Oh,
right there. Do you
cool.
see that that's
Yeah,
a little airplane?
that's the
That
shadow.
that's the shadow of where I was. I was in that airplane looking out the window and took this picture. And then
Wow.
yeah, and then I had help, making the cover, um, enhancing the photo and everything. But this is a real photo that I took. So that made me feel really, and this is
Yeah.
actually this is the hinterland of Guyana, the jungles of Guyana, and this really is
Mhm.
the water is fascinatingly, which is why it's called. Oh, I should tell us why it's called Black River Redemption. The title is the waters of Guyana are black. They look black, like
Hmm.
and it's from the silt in the water. It's not dirty
Okay.
water. It's not polluted water, but it's from a special type of silt that gets into the water, and it truly makes the water look black. You can even drink it. I drank the water. It's not like when you get up close and you like hold some in your hand, you can see it's really just a light brown, but when it's layered on top of each other and it
Mhm.
reflects, it's like a mirror. You can really, it's fascinating. So that's why it's called
Wow.
Black River. And redemption is anybody who's read the first book knows that the character, the main, you don't need to read the first book. I mean, it's more of a preface. Like you can read it if you want to. This is definitely a standalone. But in the first book, in A Wild Place, the main character Lizzie, she gets she gets kidnapped and she loses a lot of her confidence, right? She's dealing with some
Mhm.
post-traumatic stress disorder. She feels, anxiety, all of these things that you would really feel if you went through that kind of experience.
Yeah.
And this book is sort of her redemption in that she goes through another traumatizing experience, but this time she is able to take control, right? She's responsible
Mhm.
for her escape and her survival. And so it's in that sense, it's a redemption of character, of self
Mhm.
and a regaining of confidence, so to speak.
Cool.
And I think we've all been through that on maybe on a different level where we've had some experience that's caused us to lose a lot of our
Yeah.
confidence, right? And
Yeah.
to feel a little bit crippled, and then we have to build it back up over time, right? So this is just a little bit more of a little more stark example of how that could happen. But
Mhm. So, are you planning any sequels, future books with Lizzie?
there is to be a third book, which I have not started writing, but there is a third book in this series planned out, and it's about it's about these two sisters, Lizzie and Jean, and the third book
Mhm.
is actually going to be more oriented towards Jean, and
Okay.
it's going to take place in Mexico. And
Oh, fun. I'll
yeah,
have
yeah,
to
it's
give
going
you all my pictures from while I'm there.
yes, yeah, it's going yeah, that's right, because you're going there. Actually, there's going to be, and it's going to talk because I also after Guyana, I went to Namibia, and then after Namibia, I was posted in Mexico, and that was a crazy experience, being immersed in the politics of Mexico. And so, I really want to get some of there's only so much you can tell because there's there's some people you don't want to get in trouble with, right?
You don't want any country's secret people to come get you.
Yeah, I don't want anybody's secret people to come get me, but I can fictionalize a lot of it, and
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the one thing I did not mention about Black River Redemption is that I do talk about one of their social problems down there, which is malaria.
Mm-hmm.
Malaria is a problem there, and not in the city or right on the coastal areas, but into the hinterland. They call the hinterland the jungle, right? Where you get deep into the jungle, and you can really only access it with a plane or via the waterways. They get around a lot. It's like the rivers are like the highway of the country, right? So to get to those places, it can be really difficult to reach those communities, right? The indigenous communities, or that are pretty far out there, and so they don't always get medication. There's crime, and I talk about the issue of malaria in the book. That's kind of one of that. I actually the dedication of the book is to the children who have died unnecessarily from malaria. And malaria is a very treatable disease. I've had malaria actually when I was in West Africa, and it's very treatable, and it's just an issue of getting the medication to the people who need it. And children are very vulnerable. Pregnant women are very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of unnecessary deaths around that.
There's also I knew a guy. He was a teacher at the high school that was part of the middle school I went to. And he did a trip to South Africa and came back with malaria, but they didn't realize that he had it, so they didn't treat it in time. So he didn't die, but he has all sorts of health problems.
Health complications. And that's one of the very interesting things about malaria. Like, for instance, when you fall ill in a country, sometimes the best thing you can do is go to a local doctor, right? Not think, oh my gosh, I have to fly home and get treated. I need to go fly home and get treated in my country because I don't trust their medical system. Well, even if it is like a developing country, they're accustomed to treating those problems, right? So those are the issues they're going to look for, right? So if you come down, and that's one of those kind of catch-22 things. Like if I flown back to the United States with malaria, that would not have been what they would have tested for, and the doctor might not have even known what medication to give me. But I go to some little clinic in West Africa, and they get tested, and they're like, just another case of malaria. Here, take this medication in 5. And they know, right? Because some strains of malaria are resistant to certain types of medication. So, the local doctors know what the strain is resistant to, et cetera, which is impossible for a doctor in Minnesota, for instance, to know that kind of information.
Yeah.
And you got a good random tangent there, but it's exciting to talk about.
That's what this is all about. It's all behind the scenes, like, stuff that goes into a story that sometimes is completely irrelevant to the actual story, but like matters a lot where you're coming from, like with all your ideas coalescing into one thing anyway.
Yeah, it was all my travels have been so enriching personally and changed my perspective on the world, and given me so much inspiration for my writing. And it's really great to even have a captive audience here to talk about it.
So if it were going to be made into a movie, who would you pick to play the main character?
That's such a good question, because I have to tell you, I actually think that this book would make a really good movie. Would make a really good movie. What was the name of that? I'm so terrible at pop culture. The name of that woman in the Hunger Games.
Oh, Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Lawrence, I think, would play a really good. I think she'd play a really good protagonist in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she would. Yeah.
You're probably right. She seems to play like so many different type characters very well.
Yeah, that's I don't know. Or me, I'd play it. Hollywood,
always
don't gas the author.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, okay. So, for last question, what should we be most excited to learn about as we read Black River Redemption?
You know, okay, well, I guess it depends on what perspective you're coming from, because I'm a huge politics geek. So I would say like the kind of, political things that you would absorb through the story, like how I wrote it is how it happens, right? Like when you're in these types of countries. So that would be what I, coming from my perspective. But if you're into like, yeah, so I guess that would be, it's this really interesting tale of like intrigue and mystery and romance and adventure and excitement and the political machinations, what goes on behind the scenes with the State Departments and the local military forces and the foreign forces, all these different people at play. That would be, I think, would be the really interesting part. And the fact that, it's not boring, right? It's an interesting read. So
Yeah.
it's a tale, it's a tale.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely excited.
Thank you.
I'm at the very, very beginning where Lizzie and her sister are like arguing, and I'm like, oh, I do that with my sister.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
hope it's relatable in that sense. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come on and chat. And I hope that any of you are listening, have the opportunity to read my book. And I hope, you learn some things. I hope you learned some things. I hope you enjoy yourself and you feel like it was worth it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Where would you like readers to come find you? In the virtual world.
In the virtual world. So I have a website, which is www.jesseise.com. So spelled
like your name.
Yes. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and my books are on Amazon. Just Google, go onto Amazon and search Jess Eise, and it'll all pop up. EISE. So,
awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And we'll have the discussion at the end of the month. So if you want to come back, you're welcome to, but you don't have to if you don't want to know what to talk about until later. So yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Aurelia.